In the previous lecture, we discussed about what are different components involved in any OAuth2 flow. And at the same time, we also discussed there are 5 different grant types or auth flows involved inside OAuth framework. And based upon the scenario that we want to follow inside our application, we can choose one of these grant type based upon our security requirements. When I say grant flow or OAuth flow, that means these are the flow that authorization server, client and resource servers they follow in order to generate tokens, validate tokens and interact with each other. So in this lecture, let's try to see the first grant type, which is authorization code. You can see this is the high level flow that will happen inside authorization code grant type OAuth2 flow. This is very similar what we have done on the Stack Overflow website. Comparing to that scenario, I can say I'm a user and the resource owner. Client is the Stack Overflow website. Auth server and resource server is the Google. So first, as an user, I will go to the client website and I will say I want to sign up or log into your application, and you can leverage my resources which are staying in the Google resource server like last name, my email to let me into your application. So then client or Stack Overflow website, they will say, okay, you tell the auth server of the Google that you are okay to share the credentials and I'll redirect them to their login page. You have to enter your Gmail credentials and prove your identity. So that's what will happen in step 3, where I'll be redirected to the auth server of the Google and I have to enter my credentials. Once I enter my credentials, the auth server will give an authorization code to the client. Please remember, authorization code is not the access token. We are not yet generated the access token. Now in the next step, which is step 5, client will make a request again, this time in the backend by taking the authorization code to the Google auth server saying that it seems the user proved his identity and this is the authorization code that I have received from you. I want to generate an access token for that user based upon the authorization code that you have shared. So then again auth server will validate the authorization code that it previously shared, and if everything is valid, it will give a token in step 6 to the client. Once client has the token in its hand, it will directly call the resource server in the backend like I want to access the resources of so and so user, and this is the access token that I received from the auth server. Now resource server will internally validate with auth server is this token is really valid that you shared to the client. If both resource server and auth server agrees like this is a valid token and it does not expire, in the last step the resource server will give the protected resources to the client, which in this case my last name, first name, email to the Stack Overflow. So with this the flow will complete and I'll be able to log into the Stack Overflow website or any client application. You can see in the backend, particularly in step 2 and 3, where client is making a request to the auth server initially, it has to send the following important details in order to generate a authorization code. The first one is client ID. If you can recall, client ID is the ID which generated for each and every application whenever someone registered themselves in the Google or GitHub or Facebook. Like I can go to Google website and I can say, I want to leverage your Gmail login inside my website, and I can register by providing whatever details that they are asking me. Post that they will give me a client ID along with the client credentials like client secret. So in the step 2 and 3, I'll just pass the client ID to prove, okay, I belongs to Stack Overflow. I want to make a request to your Google auth server. And next is the redirect UI. So redirect UI is the value which the auth server will redirect once the login of the user is successful. If you have mentioned some value during the registration of the client initially, then auth server will make sure to redirect to the default value if you don't mention this redirect URI for each and every request. Next, scope is similar to authorities. Like we are requesting the auth server, I want to get access token with the scope like read or write. Based upon the scope that we are sharing, the auth server will decide whether I want to generate a token for this client or not. Next, state is a value which is used to avoid CSRF attacks by generating a token at the client side. So you can expect the same value coming from auth server and resource server so that we make sure that no one interpret our request and no one tampered the request. And at last, we also should send response type with the value code which indicates that the auth server that inside OAuth2 we want to follow the authorization code grant type. Whenever the auth server sees response type with the value code, it understands okay, this client application they want authorization code and they were following the authorization code grant. So once we send all these details in step 2 and 3, I'll get a authorization code in step 4 as you can see. Again in step 5, where client after received authorization code from auth server, they will again make a request to the auth server for a token belong to that particular user. So this time they have to send code. Code is the value that we received in the above steps like authorization code value. Next in this client ID and client secret. Along with the client ID, I should also send the client secret which is like my password to the auth server to prove okay, I am the original Stack Overflow for whom initially Google issued a client ID and client secret. If these client ID and client secret are wrong, obviously Google come to know this request is not coming from the Stack Overflow and they will deny the request. And the last two are like grant type and redirect UI. Redirect UI you already know that we discussed in the top. And grant type with the value authorization code. Like we have to indicate to our auth server which grant type that we want to follow. And we are mentioning authorization code which identifies that we are following authorization code grant type inside our flow. So once these values are sent in the step 5 by the client, the token will be issued by the auth server. You might have observed that in order to get an access token, the client made a request to auth server 2 times. One is initially with only client and redirecting the user to that Google login page. And in that step, we get the authorization code from the auth server. Next, by taking this authorization code, client again made a request to the auth server with both authorization code and client credentials. And this time I will get a access token from the auth server. You may ask like, why do we need 2 different steps? Why can't we achieve both of them in a single step? Like in a single step, I can send my client credentials, I can send redirect URL, everything, scope, CSRF token, and I can redirect the user to login page of Gmail, and I can get the access token in a single step. Yes, I will also agree that we can achieve this in a single step, but the reason why we follow 2 different steps in authorization code grant type is it will provide you more security. In the very first step, first authorization server will validate whether the user, the resource owner who is providing credentials on its login page is originally a valid user or resource owner or not. If he is a valid resource owner, it will generate an authorization code to the client, and in the next step, client has to prove its own identity by providing client credentials and authorization code in order to get the access token. So this way, we have 2 levels of security in this flow, and we also have implicit grant type where these 2 steps are clubbed into a single step, and we don't have that authorization code in between. Directly within a single step, we get the access token from the auth server. But these days, no authorization server like big organizations, they are encouraging us to use the implicit grant type which has only 1 step. Rather, they want everyone to follow the authorization code grant type due to the security issues. That's why if you have a strong reason why you have to go implicit grant type, then only go. Otherwise, please use the authorization code grant type only. With this, I'm assuming you understand what is authorization code grant type inside OAuth2 flow, how the navigation or request and response will flow during authentication and authorization flow. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lecture where we discuss about the implicit grant type.